first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Weatherman, we can't allow any further delay. So stop your waiting.
Well, hello and welcome to First Alert Weather Podcast, episode 119, folks. I'm Chief Meteorologist Mark Nelson, and we have the one and only Katie Zuniga. How you doing?
Doing well.
Okay, so we are between our shows. We're recording this more often in the evenings. Notice maybe we're a little more dressed up than normal. And I've got a fresh light on me there. And, you know, Katie, when I was listening to this driving home recently, I thought, what is all that squeaking noise? And I think it's this. It's this chair back here. You should clearly have a quiet chair. Yes, it's a recording studio, but you should have a quiet chair, you know, when you're recording something with audio. So anyway, we have an interesting episode this week because we teased that we would talk about this upcoming winter. So we're going to do that. Well, there's our little outline right there. The cool showers are back. We won't spend nearly as much time on our current weather pattern. We are recording this on Thursday. No, it's Wednesday. October 16th. Tomorrow's going to be Thursday. We know this probably won't get edited till Thursday morning. So by the time you listen to this, things are probably drying out Thursday afternoon. And we will have had a bunch of showers and it will have snowed in the mountains, which is kind of exciting. Big excitement. So we'll cover that, the cool showers, what we see in the next week and a half or so. Then my winter thoughts. I don't really give a forecast, just the thoughts. Okay. And then a special guest. We've got a guest from the Cascades Volcano Observatory to talk about volcanoes and Mount Adams specifically, because I know there was some interest recently. We were interested. We'd heard about earthquakes in September. So is it a big deal or is it no big deal? So we're going to hear all about that. And we have some viewer photos that are kind of pretty as well. So let's just jump right into it. Yeah, October, ready to go. So October so far, we're at the halfway point. We're recording this on the 16th. So today we were 64. We were cooler with some showers around this morning. It's been a warm month, 3.2 degrees above average. But
we talked about this before, though. The nights have been cooler. So I think we could be higher than that if we were only looking at the daytime
at the
average.
Maxes. You're right. Yeah, and that 12th warmest, first half of October, it's 12th warmest. That's based on the high and the low temps. So, you're probably right. If we just took the highs up, it'd be a little higher on the list. It is amazing in October how quickly things go downhill because our average high now, I think it's 64 already. We're down in the low to mid 60s. And we had a little bit of rain, but we had a nice dry period there. Half an inch of rain so far. Typical October, we've had about 3.5 inches of rain. And there we go. This is the view at what time? 4:13 p.m. this afternoon. The Jeff Flood Express at Timberline. If you're a skier, you know where this is. And looks nice. A little dusting of snow. I think, Katie, didn't we have a dusting of snow at this elevation at 6,000 feet back in like mid-September? Is that right? But we're going to do better tonight. We're actually going to have some snowfall up there. We figure about 6 inches coming up at Timberline, 4 to 7 inches. So that's exciting. By the way, just for fun. So I don't think this is going to happen, but if we get a big snowy October, does it mean anything for the winter? I think what happens in October probably stays in October most years. 1984-85 was a good snow winter up in the Cascades. That was the snowiest October on record up at Government Camp back to about 1950. 56 was a good year, as I recall. 61, I think, was a good year. 91 was a terrible year. That was a drought year. The whole West Coast. I think it was an El Nino year. Yeah. So we had a big October, got excited, and then things went downhill. Yeah.
And just because I like to do this for those that are just listening, what we're looking at here is that total snowfall in October. So 1984, that's in that first spot. It had a total of 34 inches. That's what Mark was talking about. And then the fifth, 1971, that was 24 inches. So 10 inches different between the top five.
And we do recommend you watch the video version for this very reason, because we use, in our business, we do a lot of weather graphics, right? So,
well, I have an old coworker who said it's called television.
Yeah, that is kind of the point, isn't it?
To see.
Even though we're podcasting, and podcasts are both video and audio. A lot of people watch the video version. Okay, so we'll quickly go through what we have coming up. Katie, what was that? Were you excited about something?
I get excited at the upper level patterns.
500 millibar pattern? Wow. Show her a 500 millibar pattern. She goes wild. Look at that. So
like ice cream on a sunny day.
I zoomed in with the topping on it, caramel, obviously. So here's the upper level pattern. This is from the Euro. Oh, very nice, Katie. I see your push alert you did 5 minutes ago.
Yes, I just did it right before you called me.
Looks like there's a misspell. No, just kidding.
Oh, I was like, what? I spell checked that.
I'm just kidding. It's fine.
For those of you that don't know, I don't edit my own stuff very well, so I always run my things through spell checker.
We do little push alerts. Yeah, that's why we have the first alert weather app.
Yep. And once it comes out there, it's out.
I digress. It takes a few minutes to get there. So Thursday midday. So we got a cool upper level trough going through right now. And for the forecast, I use the Euro Ensemble forecast, just not the operational run, which is a collection of the 51 different runs. So we got troughing going through. Wherever it's blue, it's a little lower than normal heights. This is up at 500 millibars, which is about halfway through the atmosphere. 1,000 millibars is about the surface. 0 millibars would be there's no atmospheric pressure, so the top of the atmosphere. So this is about halfway up, at least pressure-wise. And this is about 18,000 feet up. So I should make that clear. That's halfway up pressure-wise, not, the top of the atmosphere is not at 36,000 feet. So you can see troughing over us, but it's not sticking around. What we would call flat ridging, you can see my cursor, right? We won't belabor that as always. But you can see kind of this flat ridging. Yes, heights are higher than normal on Saturday, later Friday into Saturday, but since it's a very flat ridge, there is a low-level system kind of hanging up, an atmospheric river. They're going to get a ton of rain in lower mainland BC, Vancouver, Victoria. Lots of rain coming up this early to mid-weekend up there, but that should keep us dry. It's going to be a close call Friday and Saturday for us. Some cloud cover, but I think most showers or all showers should stay north of the Columbia River. So that's our plan. That's why we're going dry Friday and Saturday. By Sunday night, there's an upper level trough approaching, and you go, oh, here comes another cold trough, right? Right, Katie?
Nope. Well,
because
I just know what's coming.
You knew the split was going to happen.
Yeah,
look at that.
I did.
Sunday night to Tuesday afternoon. Part of that low just kind of pinches off and goes off to the west. Part goes by to the north, which leaves us not totally high and dry. We get some rain on Sunday, leftover showers Monday, then probably dry Tuesday and Wednesday. Is that the last one I have? Let's see, Tuesday. Okay, so then I take a whole week. Let me back up. See that ridging off to the west over the Gulf of Alaska up here? It looks like something like that hangs around for the next week, most likely. At times, troughs will drop. Well, let's go to the next one. This is the whole week, Wednesday the 23rd through Wednesday the 30th, almost covering, up to the second to the last day of the month. And you do see, in general, upper level ridging higher than normal heights over the Gulf of Alaska and lower than normal heights over central and western Canada. So in this setup, we would expect some weather systems to come down at us from the northwest from time to time. It's not totally dry, probably a little drier than normal, though. And that is interesting. Typically, we don't see, someone could argue with me, I suppose, on this one, but typically it seems like we don't see a typical La Niña pattern or El Nino pattern develop in October necessarily. When we talk about, the upcoming winter pattern, it usually settles in at times over the winter, not usually in October. Although in this case, this is actually what we would expect to see in a La Niña winter. We'd see this pattern repeat. Higher than normal heights well to the west, kind of troughing over the maybe northwest USA maybe. Just throwing that out there. Not saying that's the beginning of the pattern, but
well, and I'm just looking at those dates, and I see that Wednesday the 30th. So I'm thinking of trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, I don't think we can infer too much out of this sense.
Nope.
Not only because it's so far out, but also we don't know if this is the 7-day average. For all we know, there's a big trough carving south that day, and it's wet, or at that point a trough is moving, so we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But we do know this is the ensemble precip total from the Euro for the next 2 weeks, which would include tonight's and tomorrow morning's rain, which is maybe a quarter to half an inch. But it's below average. About an inch and a half here in the valleys, more, of course, in the mountains. Canadian.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a little bit wetter.
I was going to say, Canadian wants us wet.
I think the GFS ensemble average was not like the Canadian, but it's kind of in between the two. So this would argue a little wetter than normal. This would argue a little drier than normal. So, I don't know. There you go. So what I don't see, and I've said this on the air several times this week, I don't see a turn towards a sudden stormy pattern. Was it in 2022 or 2021 when we had those 2 bomb cyclones just offshore, the 940-something millibars, well offshore? We were getting pretty stormy weather quickly in late October. I don't see that happening for now, especially with that big ridging, well, some ridging offshore to the west. We don't see like a long stormy period, but we can get normal rain out of that. So there you go. So that's your current weather update. Let's plunge into what we think we might see this winter. Big caveat here, folks. I don't do a winter forecast. I'm not bad-mouthing the people that do. God bless them. There's a great meeting at OMSI this week. It's the usual "What will the winter be like?" meeting. Actually, I think we call it the local AMS chapter, American Meteorological Society. We actually call it the Winter Weather Conference.
Yep.
Actually, I think there's a longer name than that. But more or less, several people get up there and give their thoughts on what they think might be happening during this upcoming winter, including the official weather service forecast folks will be there as well.
I always like your recap of what we had.
Oh, we're trimming that recap way back. We've had some complaints. That's actually not true, but some have suggested, and I agree, we're going to cut it back a little bit. I was getting a little bit too out of control.
Not you.
It barely fit on the thumb drive. Good Lord. Yeah. All right. So I call it my winter thoughts. Just, what are we seeing out there? What are the possibilities? And, it's just a reason to throw up a bunch of really cool graphics. Let's jump right into it. So last winter, I have more detailed notes here. So if you hear the paper here. Last winter, we were warmer and wetter than average, but we had a strong El Nino winter. That's not unusual. We did have, as we all remember, it's funny, we all remember that terrible week.
Yeah.
Mid-January, Northern Oregon, Washington. But other than that, the winter was milder and a little wetter than average. There was nothing all that interesting about the rest of the winter. It behaved like an El Nino winter. That was the most intense cold and wind episode in the Portland metro area since February of 1989. I'm not sure why I have the question mark there.
Yeah, I was just wondering what that was.
I grabbed that straight from my winter recap presentation to our local AMS chapter back in March. We did have 2 episodes of heavy Cascade snowfall in early January, then again in, was it late February? Late February, I think. Otherwise, it was terrible. Remember, Ski Bowl was not able to open for Christmas break.
Yep, I remember.
It was really bad to start. So that was last winter. I have some other notes here? Yeah. So in the last 3 winters, we've had 4 big, what I call apocalypse events. What is it? Was it a snow apocalypse? Was it an ice apocalypse? Was it a cold? Usually they're a combo of one or the other. An event that shuts the city down for a day or more. We've had 4 of those in the last 3 winters. In the past, sometimes we would go 3 or 4 winters and not have one of those. So we've had our fill. Last year we had 2 of those. One, what am I looking at here? Oh, I'm sorry. When we had the one this last year in January.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking the year before, here we go, right here. We had the late February snowstorm that year. This first point is incorrect that I had in the presentation because we also had Christmas cold and freezing rain in December of 2022. It messed up PDX, people trying to get out of here. I remember Andy Carson had to drive to Phoenix to do Christmas with his family. That was so there were 2 events that year, one this last winter. And then there was one back in 2020 as well.
So the fun fact for me, I will always remember that February snowstorm because I had just started.
Oh, that's right.
It was in February of 2023.
Is that when you were saying, I can't wait for a snowstorm?
I mean, I don't like the impacts. I want to make sure everybody knows that, but I do. I love a good snowstorm. I think they're one of my favorite things. And I was really excited to go out when I just started.
To each their own.
Yeah. That's
you just like it because you got to hang out at the top level of that hotel. Katie insisted on the upper level. She didn't want people walking around above her at night.
So that is true. And I also don't like to be near the elevator because people come and going at all times of the night. So
did you really go into the hotel and slam your fist on the counter and say, "Do you know who I am?" Is that what you said?
I just said, I have to work at 2:00 tomorrow morning. Is there any chance I could be not below anybody or away from the elevator? And they said, let me see what we can do.
They had pity on you.
They did. They were very nice.
All right. So that was, so this was the year before, winter 22-23. That was a La Niña winter.
Yes.
We'd had 3. That was our 3rd consecutive La Niña winter. It was also our 8th consecutive winter with snow at PDX, which means last year when we had the 1.6 inches leading into that cold event, that was our 9th consecutive winter. We've never had, until these last 2 winters, we've never had more than 7 winters with consecutive with measurable snow at PDX. We are one could argue we're overdue statistically only, but overdue for a snowless winter here in Portland.
Oh. I bet you there's a lot of people who would really appreciate that.
I would. It makes our job easier. I'll just be honest, the pay is the same whether it's mild and 40 degrees or there's a huge storm and all I do is think about work for 2 weeks. Not that I don't love my job, in case the bosses are listening.
I like every once in a while having something really interesting to dig into. If we had to do it all the time, we'd be exhausted and we'd get burnout. But just every once in a while to have something that gets us going.
Why does it have to be snow and ice? Why can't we have a good old-fashioned flood or a good old-fashioned 5-hour windstorm? It's exciting. We watch the load leading up to it. It's just as much meteorological interest and it's done 5 hours later.
Sure, I'll take it.
Why does it have to be these week-long things? Oh, drives me nuts. It's going to change. It's going to go back to how it used to be. All right. So one of the big things we look at, I'm sure you know this if you've been following weather over the years, we watch the ENSO indices. Basically, are we seeing warming or cooling in the tropical Pacific Ocean? And El Nino is when we have warming in the tropical Pacific, and that's a much larger mass of warm water, warmer than normal water in the tropical Pacific, and that causes convection and causes things to kind of reorient around the globe. It affects the weather around the globe. The opposite occurs as well, La Niña. La Niña is when we have a cooler than normal waters that develop in the central and the eastern tropical Pacific. And when that happens, we tend to get different kinds of ripple effects that go out across the globe. All right, so where are we now? Remember last year we were in a strong El Nino. Mm-hmm. The line on the left here shows what has occurred since January. It has gone down. We are now in neutral territory, neutral, la nada, nothing. Okay? Models tell us, this is the model average, say we're going to cross into the La Niña threshold as we go into the northern hemisphere winter here in the next couple of months. Mm-hmm. That said, do I have one more? Yeah. That said, not all models are showing us actually making it to La Niña. I think NOAA right now has about a 70 or 60%, 70% chance of us going into La Niña. There is a chance that we only just stay in let's call it the cold side of neutral. All right.
Okay.
And these are all man-made thresholds, man-made cutoffs. So really, from our atmosphere's thinking, what's the difference between cold neutral and weak La Niña? Is it that much different? Okay. So the point is, just remember, we're going into a very weak La Niña. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in those years, the classic La Niña effects that we think of, it could be weaker. Could be a total crapshoot this winter. Mm-hmm. Once again, that's one reason I don't do a forecast. But the point is, the model averages here from NOAA say most likely we're going into a weak La Niña. All right. In the La Niña winters, we see three things happen. I hope I remember all three. One is we see the jet stream kind of a little more wavy than normal. We tend to have a little more stormy periods, which can lead to more flooding or more windstorms. All right, the southerly windstorms. One other effect is that we tend to have high pressure blocking tends to want to develop to our west, kind of like a little bit of like what we're seeing, what we just showed you that last week of October, where there tends to be more higher than normal heights, upper level heights to the west of us, well to the west of us. And that can bring the Arctic air over Canada a little closer to us in that pattern. We might get more conflicts between the Arctic air and the mild westerly flow. I've noticed in La Niña winters, it seems like we don't get patterns locked in for long periods. Seems like in La Niña winters, if I remember correctly, we don't tend to have, 2 weeks of upper level highs just sitting around blocking inversions, east wind. It seems like that doesn't happen in La Niña winters. It seems like things tend to keep moving in La Niña winters. That's just my recollection. And this one, a little box and whiskers diagram here, this shows for Oregon, Western Oregon Climate Division, precipitation, whether it's rain or snow. In El Nino winters, you see the red is the average. Neutral winters, or La Niña. And Katie, do you see that? You can kind of see how it goes. Tends to be higher in La Niña winters, a little wetter than average.
Well, what I'm also noticing too is when you look at the average, the red bar, and you go over to the ledger, they're both in that 18. All three of them are in the 18 to 20.
Sure.
The average is not much different.
It's the average of many stations, which would make it, there wouldn't be a huge amount of variability anyway. But you're right, it's not dramatically different. You see the boxes and the whiskers. Yep. It seems like there's more variability in La Niña years. Yeah. We have had very wet La Niña winters. Mm-hmm. We've also had some dry kind of stinker winters where we didn't get much mountain snow and much precipitation. So a lot of variability. Yeah. And here we go. I'm sure you cannot read this, but these are just my own notes. I believe it or not, I have a spreadsheet for La Niñas in the Pacific Northwest. So I just wanted to put my wording in there, this kind of covers what we already covered a bit. But in 22-23, the last La Niña, we had the city shut down by a cold and ice storm leading into Christmas Eve. Big late February snowstorm. In between, not much happened. The previous La Nina, remember we had 3 years in a row of this La Nina. Previous one in 21-22, mild winter. We did have some metro snow and ice during Christmas week, but it was more of kind of a wet onshore sort of flow snow. The city didn't shut down. It wasn't extreme, kind of a mess though. And then this is unusual in La Nina. We had a February and March that were warmer and drier than average. ... Strange. I noticed I wrote that. Okay, that first year of that 3-year La Nina episode, 2020 and 2021, mild and wet through mid-January, not a single snow or ice event or significant foothill snow. And then there was, in mid-February, big snow and ice storm in Northwest Oregon, the Gorge, Southwest Washington. That was the one where Salem and the Valley just got nailed by like a historic ice storm.
I remember
Central
that.
and North Valley.
My friend had a tree. She was in Dallas, and it just toppled. It was bad.
Other than that, kind of quiet that La Nina winter. So even in these La Nina winters, especially recently, it seems like, we can have long periods of quiet weather, benign weather. That also had a mild March. So it's interesting, 2 out of the last 3 La Ninas had a mild March. Doesn't seem to fit the narrative as much. And then you go farther back in time. The one crazy one was 2016-17. So many snow and ice events. And then I also remember this one, La Nina 2011-2012. I remember that January event. Big snowstorm. We were wondering, are we going to get a foot or a foot and a half of snow here in the metro area? And instead, right at the end, models shoved it slightly north of us. There was a foot of snow in one night in St. Helens. There was 16 inches in Chehalis in one night up on I-5.
Wow.
And I think I had 9 inches up west end of the gorge, but then it warmed up the next morning. So, yeah. Yes?
I remember that, actually. I was...
Where were you in 2016? Or no, 11-12?
Here. I remember. Yeah, we actually just had a baby, and we were home with them. So I remember my mom came over, and we were snowed in.
Wait, where were you living then?
Over in the Happy Valley area.
Yeah, there was some snow. Yeah, that night it snowed quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, does La Nina mean we're going to get a bunch of snow? Well, possibly. There have been 4 big snowstorms during the last 8 La Nina winters. I have the last 8. Yeah, 8 right there. Do I have the 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I mean, we've had some sort of snow during the last 8 La Nina winters. The last time we didn't officially have snow in Portland during a weak to moderate La Nina, so many charts and graphs.
Wow.
Isn't this great? 07-08. That said, the hardcore weather geek will remember 07-08 is not thought of as a snowless winter because we had multiple events with snow just above the valley floor. That's the last time I remember living at 1,000 feet where we had a lot of snow. I remember one day having 8 inches of snow, fresh snow, and I went down to Portland for some event. There was like a sloppy dusting with snow showers in the city, but it was all higher up. And then in the one kind of stinker winter where La Nina just didn't deliver anything, 2000-2001, kind of a drought year. It just, nothing worked right that year. So we had no snow then. So it's possible, but that just makes me think, Katie, most likely we're probably going to get something this winter. Yeah. Except that would be our 10th consecutive winter with snow. Yeah. Okay, let's go up in the mountains.
I remember this one.
Yeah, beautiful chart. Many beautiful charts here, folks. We've got government camp in the blue. During La Nina winters, how much snow falls on Mount Hood? Total winter snow. In fact, this goes all the way through May, of course, right? We've got down at 4,000 feet government camp, and then Mount Hood Meadows at 5,250 or something like that, where they measure it. I mean, if you look at the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, La Nina's back to 07. Every single one has done just fine. But we have that stinker year of 2000, 2001. Didn't do so great. 95, 96, it was slow getting going. 96 was huge in January, though. I remember great skiing then. But the point is, people ask about, they'll ask me about seasons past. People nowadays ask me in August. I'm like, I'm still enjoying summer. I don't want to talk about this till October. So it's October and we're talking about it. But you can see, if I was thinking seasons past, nobody is paying me to say this. I don't have a pass right now. But this is probably should be a decent year, right? Based on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's more. There's always more. Let's just do November and December. Could we have a decent start? Because, it's all about how early do we get on the slopes, when. So I just did this one today. So we take the last, all the La Nina winters back to 1980, whether it's weak, moderate, or strong. Average for any November plus December at government camp at 4,000 feet is something like 82 inches. So La Nina average is 92 inches. So there does seem to be a little better chance for an little earlier, heavier snow. But not every year. Look at 17, 18, and 11, 12.
That's what I was just about to say, 11, 12, and then 95, 96.
Yeah, I mean, 98, 99 was an amazing snow year, but it must have started late. That's right. We had the cold spell in December 98. So sometimes it takes a while to get going, but I think that's it. Any year it can be slower to get going. And we do know historically the last 10 years or so, we've had more late ski season starts. It seems to be more common that it stays warmer deeper into the fall. I mean, our climate is warming, so that may be what's going on. That's actually
the conversation that my husband and I had about when we should get ours, and we both said the same thing. We're like, it just feels like the last several years, it's a late start.
Yes. Yes, that seems more common.
Yeah.
But I've got more. That's November and December. Let's just do November only.
Oh.
Pretty soon we'll be down to the first 10 days. No, I'm just kidding. November only at government camp during La Nina winters. What do we have? The average, sure enough, La Nina average is a little higher, but we're talking a few inches, like 4 or 5 inches higher. I just think, looking at that, Katie, it's just a total crapshoot any November.
Yeah.
I mean, some years, a bunch of snow, a lot of years, not much at all. At that elevation, at least. I don't have the data for November only at Meadows or Timberline.
Yeah, this is at government camp that we said.
Right.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah,
for that. That's the only official snow measuring location up on Mount Hood is at government camp.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that reports regularly. There is the snow test site where they put the big pole in the snow and do the that's up at 5,400.
Yeah. So, looking at this, I would be like, maybe I'll wait.
Who knows? I mean, really, November, it really is a total crapshoot every year. Okay, one other thing I've focused on La Nina, El Nino, the ENSO connection. We are still in a PDO cold phase. It's Pacific Decadal Oscillation. It's a long-term oscillation of warmer and cooler than average waters in the North Pacific. The one on the right, cold phase, we've been in that a good chunk of the time the last 20 years. For sure, the last 4 or 5 years? For at least 4 years, we have been in this cold phase. And when we're in the cold phase, we do tend to have more La Nina-like winter stuff. A little cooler and wetter than normal seems more likely. Not always, but more often. Whereas the warm phase on the left, that's where you have a lot of cooler than normal water across much of the interior Pacific Ocean, but it's warmer than average along the west coast. We haven't had a lot of that lately. Notice it kind of resembles El Nino too. The two kind of go together. It's almost like a long-term ENSO phenomenon in the North Pacific. Hopefully I explained that correctly.
Yeah.
The normal ENSO in the tropical Pacific comes and goes each winter or each year. But PDO seems to stay for longer periods of time. It's a much longer time scale.
You're making me want to break out my notes from college because I have a teacher who had all of that, the phases tracked just kind of like you do with ENSO and La Nina and El Nino. And he has it mapped with what happened with ENSO those years and then how that impacted like the main weather pattern, but just the chunks of time that were in those and when they transitioned. I have all of that in my notes from school. So I might need to look that up.
And I know fisheries people are very interested in this because it affects, the Pacific Ocean warming and cooling affects them more dramatically than our weather.
Yeah,
this is the same thing, but spread over the PDO since 1985, the warm periods and the cold periods. And you can clearly tell since about 98, we've been in cool far more of the time than warm. So I'm curious what happens. And yet, even in this cool phase, we've had some crazy warm, record warm summers and some very warm winters as well. So I'm kind of curious what happens if we flip back to the warm phase with our climate already warming.
Yeah.
What would happen then? We'll see. Okay, so just to summarize, that's all I have. I'm not going to talk about solar cycles. We're in a max solar cycle. I'm not an expert on that. So if you were betting, you're going to Vegas, you're going to bet. Are you a big Vegas person?
I don't gamble when I go there. I like the shows.
Oh, the shows. What kind of shows? None of my business. Okay.
Cirque du Soleil is my favorite.
Oh, cool. Okay. Okay. So most likely we have a cooler and wetter than average winter ahead. That said, remember two of those last three La Nina winters were not cooler and wetter, or at least they weren't cooler. So just like I said, betting. Maybe the dice are weighted a little bit that way. Ski season should be reasonable. I have no I have no reason to believe, oh my gosh, it could be a terrible ski season. Most La Nina winters, not all, but most of them end up with good ski conditions. More on this in Wednesday's post. That's my blog post that is going up next week, next Tuesday and Wednesday. So I already had that done. I just snipped that. There is no Wednesday's post yet. There's nothing there, folks. That's for next week. I would be surprised if we don't get at least one snow and ice event, even if it's an inch or two that shuts the metro area down. Kind of a bold prediction. It just seems like this is a decent winter in which that could happen once. Chance for flooding in winter is higher than typical just because we have more weather systems moving through. It's been 28 years since the last major flood event. At some point, it's going to happen again. We just don't know when. Is this the year? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we just get more of a reasonable flood where, 5 or 8 local rivers flood. And this is one, if you live out in East County, eastern Multnomah, eastern Clark counties, exposed to that cold wind coming out of the gorge, I would expect fewer east wind episodes than the past 2 winters. Last year was an El Nino winter, was a big east wind year. When we get lots of blocking where weather systems aren't moving through, that's when that cold high pressure settles east of the Cascades. It's hard to dislodge that. And I would just say probably less east wind this year. Seems reasonable?
I think so. I mean, I've only been here for 2 winters forecasting. You've been here for more than that, so I tend to trust your opinion.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Again, the OMSI meeting, the winter weather forecast meeting from the Oregon American Meteorological Society, I've been a part of that for years. Katie, you've been there.
Yeah.
They have the forecasters coming up. It'll be this Saturday, 10 a.m. at OMSI. It's free. You do have to pay for parking, but you're in the middle of Portland. What do you expect? It's going to happen. And it should be interesting to see what those folks say. I'm sure they'll be heavily weighting their forecast towards
I'm excited.
You're going to be there. I will be there. Yeah. Always fun. Okay, let's switch gears, Katie. Something we haven't done before. I don't think we've talked to a volcano expert, so we're going to talk about volcanoes. So I want to welcome Wes Thelen from Cascades Volcano Observatory. He is let me get it right, volcanic seismologist. So let's go. All right, so we want to just introduce you. So you are Wes Thelen with the Cascades Volcano Observatory. What is your title there? What do you do?
So my official title is a research geophysicist, which is really a fancy title for somebody who's really interested about studying earthquakes on volcanoes. And so if there's an earthquake on a volcano, I'm all about it. And if there's an earthquake somewhere else, like, people often ask me about the big one, also interested in those, but there's other there's people who are better at understanding those earthquakes than I am.
So earthquakes on volcanoes. So you're the volcano guy. So if we have questions, we've come to the right place, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So my question is, what's your education background and how did you get to where you're at?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have a PhD. I did my undergraduate at University of Nevada, Reno. Go Wolfpack. And I had a double major there. I was in geology and geophysics, and then went right to the University of Washington and just happened to land at the University of Washington with Dr. Steve Malone. And I got to Seattle about a month before the 2004 eruption at Mount St. Helens started. And so there was just like a ready-made project that sort of fell in my lap, and it was great, and it kind of set me up. I did a postdoc actually here at the Cascades Volcano Observatory for a year, and then went out to Hawaii for 5. And so I was the network manager out there. Saw lots of runny red stuff.
I bet.
And yeah, I mean, it's funny. My kids were, they just thought that like being able to go see a lava lake was totally typical. And, when we came back to the mainland, they're like, what? Wait, what?
They say, this volcano doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there looking at me with a big gap in it.
These volcanoes are boring.
Right. All right. So the elephant in the room. We first contacted you because we had heard that Mount Adams had a bunch of earthquakes back in September, and there hadn't been many. So tell us what's up with Mount Adams. We know, am I correct? It's the largest volcano in Washington by mass, but it's not the highest, of course. Mount Rainier is higher.
It is. It's a giant volcano, right? And in a lot of ways, it looks like Mount Rainier. But the difference is that Mount Rainier is kind of built on a high point of the Cascades, so there's not actually as much volume as Mount Rainier doesn't have as much volume as Adams. But Adams is big. It's a monster, right? But it really hasn't done much since the last ice age, and so it hasn't had a lot of eruptions recently. And with anything, it's all about what have you done for me lately, and Adams hasn't done much lately. So with that activity level, we don't really expect to have a lot of background activity going on there. And in fact, there really isn't. There's been one station up there since the early 80s, and we would occasionally see earthquakes up there, maybe one every 2 or 3 years, and in a very nerdy way, an earthquake would happen at Mount Adams, and the one of the other seismologists would come into my office, and be like, "There's an earthquake at Adams." We'd joke about, "Oh, this is a big deal. It's an earthquake," and we do, the same thing goes for some of the other volcanoes, like Mount Baker has a kind of a similarly low background rate. Some of these other volcanoes, they're popping off earthquakes all the time. So Hood, Rainier, St. Helens, they have earthquakes all the time. But Adams, one earthquake every 2 to 3 years. So then we start kind of seeing a pattern over time that we're sort of seeing more and more earthquakes. And when we look at the raw data, because really to get an earthquake located, you have to see it on several different stations. And the network out there, the seismic network, is so sparse that really like the third or fourth closest station is actually over at St. Helens. And so it takes a magnitude 1 or so, which is not anything that you'd feel, to be able to locate it. But we can look at the raw data from the closest station and kind of see that there were some other smaller earthquakes that were happening up there. The signal was a little bit complicated because of the Williams Creek fire that was there. And so there was a lot of cultural activity. People actually, when we went up a couple weeks ago, we met one of the Forest Service employees who was falling trees around the station to try to keep it from burning down. And
bulldozers.
And so, there's all kinds of stuff and noise on that station. But when it was quiet, we could kind of see there was some smaller stuff that was happening in there. Not anything that was alarming, but one of these things where we could kind of see that there were things that we were missing. And so in response, we kind of got our heads together and thought, well, this might be a good opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about the volcano, because when you only get one earthquake every 2 or 3 years, there's just not a lot of information to go off of. Like where is magma stored? Is there any magma down there? Where is the hydrothermal system? What's going on under there? Are there faults? Those are the kinds of things that we have a good handle on at places with more earthquakes. And so our response was that we would go out and put a couple more stations out there. Now it's easy to go look at a map and kind of put some dots on a map, but there's all kinds of things that go into that in terms of getting permissions and getting equipment ready. Luckily, we did have equipment ready to go out, but just getting permissions, getting people, getting access. Until this last weekend, the whole area was still in a closed area because of the fire. And so, when we saw this, and we still see this as an opportunity to learn something about the volcano and learn a little bit more about what's happening under there. We are continuing to see earthquakes, not at elevated rates. We're still seeing them at the same rates that they have been in the past couple of months, which is, instead of like 1 or 2 every 2 to 3 years, we had 6 in the last month or so. And then we can still see there's some little tiny stuff that's occurring that's still a little too small to locate. And so there was, stuff that's kind of in like the getting toward magnitude 0. So real small stuff, but the kind of stuff that volcanoes like to do. They love these smaller earthquakes.
Does that give any more potential to like eruptions possibly happening at any point in our future, like our lifetime?
I mean, when we look at the history of eruptions in the Cascades through time, what we see is that Mount St. Helens is by far and away the most active volcano in the Cascades, and it will probably be the next one to erupt. And then within our lifetimes, there is a likelihood that one other of the volcanoes will erupt in the Cascades, but they're all basically even chances. And so we can't really tell because of where volcano science is. Our forecast windows aren't that long. And so we can't really tell years in advance that this is going to be the next volcano to erupt. We can kind of just get the instruments out there in place and track the background activity. And when we see things go above some sort of background, then we can kind of say, okay, well, we're out of what we would consider background, and then go from there.
You know what I remember as a kid, I was 11 when Mount St. Helens first woke up. And back then it was newspapers, and I used to read the newspaper. And I remember, if I recall correctly, it was only about 2 weeks from, there have been extra earthquakes at Mount St. Helens. Volcanologists are kind of interested in this. I thought it was only about a 2-week period. And within that time, I remember the day when the little crater opened at the top, there was some black soot around the crater, and it was so exciting. But so it could happen relatively quickly at any one volcano, right? With just a few weeks notice.
Right. And, I think, your memory is right. It was about, it kind of depends on it's hard for us to know because there was also in 1980 there was only one station at Mount St. Helens.
Right.
It's hard,
like Mount Adams now.
It's hard for us to know that when exactly the earthquake started up there. But from the first kind of obvious earthquake that was up there at Mount St. Helens to ash in the air in 1980 was about 7 days, and in 2004 was also about 7 days. Now, that consisted of hundreds and thousands of earthquakes, even in that 7-day period. And in 1980, you had ash in the air, and then you had months where it was just sort of going at a pretty high level. There were magnitude 4s in there, but lots and lots and lots of earthquakes, hundreds of thousands of earthquakes. And so, when we were able to get 3 stations out in the past 2 weeks up there. We have a very good sense right now that we're not getting really high rates of seismicity up there, that this is, we're just sort of seeing whatever was happening continue from September into now. And, we're not seeing any increase in rate or any change in our assessment of the volcanic hazard.
And I think for people that since, Mount St. Helens, the big May 18th eruption and then other smaller eruptions after that time, I think a lot of people think, if a volcano wakes up, oh my gosh, it's going to be like Mount St. Helens. But we could just have Newberry volcano could just be a small rift zone or a pumice cone that doesn't really affect much except for ash. And I mean, it's always possible we get a minor eruption out of any volcano, right? Without any dramatic effects on society.
Exactly. And I think that every volcano's got a bit different personality. St. Helens has these large explosions. So does Glacier Peak. But Rainier, Adams, they like to have lava flows. And so, there would be ash, but it wouldn't be the giant eruption that you saw in 1980 up there. It would be something that would be more local to the area. Now, to that, speaking to that point, the area that is really a problem for Mount Adams is Trout Lake, and it is because the volcanic activity at Mount Adams hasn't been very strong since the last ice age, that you've had time for hot water to run through the volcanic rock up there and transform it into weaker clays. And so there is, the highest hazard up there is from lahars and failure of the volcano and coming down into areas like Trout Lake. And so especially in an eruption, and when we see this internationally, that anytime that there's unrest at a volcano, that you have a higher chance of a lahar. And so we are working toward a system at Mount Adams to allow people at Trout Lake some time to get out of the way if there was a lahar. But we are really in the planning stages there. We're working on permits to put stations in. That's like the very first step. Yeah.
Can you, just in case people don't know, can you explain what a lahar is?
Course.
Because I don't think general public might know what it is.
A lahar is just a volcanic mud flow. So it's like a big debris flow or a bunch of rock and mud that comes peeling off the volcano, gets into a slurry, mixes with water, and is really mobile. And so these are the types of things that really impact the largest populations from a volcano, because they can go, where the ash might be something that's pretty close to the volcano, and pyroclastic flows also pretty close to the volcano. These lahars can travel tens of kilometers away, and Mount Rainier is a really large case example for that. And at Rainier, you've got all kinds of towns that are in drainages that are literally built on lahar deposits. And so they're, it's flat there, and it's flat for a reason. It's flat because there was a lahar that came through and made it flat. And Trout Lake, in a lot of the same ways, is also built on a lahar deposit. It's built on one of these landslides that turns into this slurry and then gets deposited in the valley down slope. But, this bit of unrest has resulted in, I think, a lot of progress in terms of building relationships with some of the local emergency managers and decision makers in the area. And I think is actually maybe one of the best things that comes out of this is that we're sort of moving forward with discussions with those emergency managers faster than we might have otherwise.
Yeah, I was thinking Glenwood is the same way, very flat. That valley's probably flat for a reason there, southeast of Mount Adams. Yeah. So if you have another question, you go. But
one more question, and it's the controversial one that I have to ask.
Uh-oh.
How does climate change affect activity and glacier dynamics?
Glacier dynamics. Well, I'm not a glaciologist, but what we do know is that with the warming environment, that we're seeing these glaciers peel back, and they're peeling back at a really, really quick rate and alarmingly fast rate. And what that's doing is it is exposing a lot of material at the toe of the glacier that's loose. It's not, it's just ready to be washed away in the next, big atmospheric flood event or atmospheric river event, or some other meteorologic event that could grab all of that material, create a slurry, and run down the hill slope. At Rainier, I'll use Rainier again as an example. We haven't really seen that play out yet. We've seen the glaciers obviously recede. Some of that material has been available for debris flows, and in some drainages there have been those debris flows occasionally, but we have not seen it on a larger scale yet. And so we're aware that that's a problem. We're trying to come up with ways that we can better track those types of flows and give either people or government agencies a heads up that something's happening.
I was thinking of Mount Hood, 2006. We had this is the most dangerous time. I think what you're referring to is right at the end of the warm season. We had in the first week of November, a very warm atmospheric river up there. I think it was 5 inches of rain in one day. There was really no snowpack on the ground. So then that White River Glacier, there was a big glacial outburst. And that came down. Meadows couldn't open for a month. I remember seeing the buses with like chest high snow at Thanksgiving weekend parked in their lot because they couldn't get out. But that would be an example of if we were to have more warm atmospheric river events. Can't believe I couldn't say that. Wow.
Well, it's been a while since we've had the last
early
one, so, you know.
Yeah.
You're out of practice.
Yeah. So you're right. Soon, there'll be one soon enough, I'm sure. November's right around the corner. But I was thinking, those early season ones are really bad because there's no snowpack to absorb, those inches of rain. So that would go right with what you're saying. A warmer climate, we'd get more of those warm events, maybe early in the season.
And stronger events too, right? At St. Helens, we actually do see that, not because of the warming climate. In fact, it's the only glacier that's still growing. But the sides of the volcano are exposed, and so that first atmospheric river event that comes through of the year typically spawns debris flows. And we've actually it's consistent enough that we've been putting instruments out there to try to catch it. The problem is that it hasn't come yet. So all the instruments that we put out in mid-September, we have to go get them next week because they're going to run out of battery, and are probably not going to see those debris flows this particular season.
Okay, let's do a quick lightning round for you. I just want your quick thoughts. What comes to mind? Say the first thing that comes to your mind. We can always edit if it's bad. I'm going to give you 4 volcanoes. Number 1, Mount Hood.
Great skiing.
True. What about? That's fine. He did it. That's the first thing you thought of. No, that's great. For your profession, volcanology wise,
dome former.
What just comes to mind? Dome former. Interesting. Crater rock is the last.
That's right,
dome,
and that's what it does. It does these little. It kind of pushes out these little domes, and it's not. I mean, if you were there at Timberline, it would feel very explosive, but it's not explosive like St. Helens is. It has really
interesting,
very uniform eruptions.
Newberry caldera or Newberry volcano.
A very interesting area because you've got the big obsidian flow there, so you can get really sticky magmas that create really interesting lava flows. And then, as you mentioned before, you can also have these rift zone eruptions. So all the way up to Bend. I mean, you look at a map and you can see all the little cones there, and lava butte, and it has the potential to do things like dam up the chutes and create waterfalls eventually. And
so interesting. Yeah, that would be your one word for that one.
Lightning round.
Crater Lake. Yeah.
Crater Lake, very quiet. There's not a lot of seismicity up there at all.
Could be quiet for a long time, I suppose. Huh?
Hopefully.
And of course, we have to ask. Yellowstone, super volcano. Yep. Wait, that's like us with weather. The hype, the snow. You mean like Yellowstone super volcano? That's like when somebody asks us, "Are we going to get snow tomorrow?" And we expect an inch or so at the top of the West Hills.
So lots of hype around Yellowstone. That's right. It keeps the spotlight off of us.
Wow, he does sound like us, Katie. Amazing. Well, Wes Thelen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all your thoughts on volcanoes and putting us at ease, I think, about Mount Adams. Okay, nobody needs to freak out, but something fun might happen within. You heard it, Katie. Within our lifetimes, he says there's a decent chance before I die that there could. Well, I have less time than you two, but there's a decent chance maybe another volcano wakes up. And they know on this podcast I'm always joking about that. I want to see that before I die. So thanks a lot from Cascades Volcano Observatory, Wes. We'll see you later. Well, that was a fun little diversion from our winter weather forecast, wasn't it, Katie?
I did. I definitely find that stuff fascinating. So I was really excited to get an opportunity to talk with him and, hear those things that he had to say. I had way more questions than what we had time for, so I might have to give him a call, off screen.
I was thinking the secret is out, folks. Sometimes in the TV world, in the broadcasting world, in the media world, we try to kind of mix things together, make it look like we were doing something live or whatnot. Did you notice? Let's see. We were in different locations, both you and I, when we recorded that.
Yep.
We were in different clothing.
Yep. I did not have any makeup on.
Nothing is the same. So we're not going to try to pretend like we just talked to Wes. We recorded that a couple days ago. So thank you very much, Wes. So good stuff. Okay, let's do viewer photos.
All right.
So we can wrap things up here. Northern Lights. I forget, Katie, you said you still did not see the Northern Lights, right?
They weren't strong enough when I worked that night, and when I went home, I was debating, do I stay up and try and see it? Do I go to sleep? And I had to work the next morning early, so I went to sleep.
Well, who made you work the next morning? That's mean. Wait a minute, you didn't have to work till like 9 a.m.
I still have children to get out to school, and I had a bunch of stuff so I had to get up early because I didn't have time to get ready for work before I got them to school.
Right.
So I had to get up early, get all my stuff done, get them ready, and then leave. So
yeah, you had plenty to do.
I did.
You're right. So we got some Northern Lights pictures. So we had 2 nights. Was it the 7th? Let's see. Yeah, it was the 7th, which I think was a Monday night, and then again on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
This is a second episode, 2 different solar storms. Corey Judah, our producer, we call him the producer for the 8 p.m. show, or sometimes other shows. This is a view from Forest Grove. He texted me after he got home. He said, "Ooh, it looks good now."
Yeah.
And I did go out. I couldn't see very well. I don't have a good northern exposure at my house. Too many trees have grown up. We need to log some more. So that was pretty. A lot of pinks and reds, or pinks and greens there. This was 3 days before. Boy, those are actually pretty similar. Notice the red is above, the green is below.
So do you know? I assumed you would know why that is. Do you?
It's because, and we have a graphic for this.
Yeah.
It's where is it where the protons or the electrons where basically the particles come into the Earth's atmosphere through the gravitational kind of a tear, not a crack in the gravitational field. They come in and they bombard and they interact with the different molecules in the Earth's atmosphere. So it can be based on the height of the molecules or what type of molecules they are.
Yeah.
Is it interacting with the nitrogen, oxygen?
It's the different heights. So you'll always have the red on the top, and then I think it was like the purpley blue and then green. Right. So it'll always be that color combination or gradient, no matter what.
Right. Although sometimes you could get green. When I was the one in May, I saw green only for a while, straight overhead. I guess it would depend on where.
Yeah, but this just from the very small amount of knowledge I have about the Northern Lights is where it starts to interact. Whatever height that is, that color. So like there's I
see what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's a band. If it starts interacting in this region, it'll be pink. If it starts interacting here, it starts to get like more purple. And then the farther down, it turns from blue to green. So maybe it didn't start to interact when you saw just green until the lower level.
This is from Andrea Gilderhus. Actually, I think I have some sort of family history there because I grew up in Hood River. First 3 years of my life, and I recognize the name. Thank you, Andrea. This was out in White Salmon. And then this one, this was that second night where we had the high clouds that were kind of messing with it a bit. So the clouds are blocking a bit, which makes it pretty neat.
Yeah.
Jeff Walter in Malino.
It almost looks photoshopped.
Yeah, really neat stuff.
It's really cool.
So if you ever have pictures you'd like to share, we also have a dog walk forecast. We like to see your dogs or cats. You had a cat on a leash, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I had a cat on a leash. And we've had zebras.
I still haven't put my duck big girl in. Chickens, whatever, badgers, skunks, whatever you keep at home.
What are the little smelly long ones? I almost called them a fritter. What are those little, they're long, narrow bodies, and they kind of smell bad.
Oh, ferrets.
Ferrets.
Some people love their ferrets, but they do smell bad. I had a friend that had a ferret when I was a kid. It wasn't, I guess we should be nice. Okay, so that's it. So I think we're out of time here. So we covered a whole bunch today. Thanks for joining us, folks. We're going to try to do the podcast every 2 weeks. Like during the holidays, I'm sure we'll miss a week or two. But thanks for joining us. Thank you, Katie, of course. And we're going to go back to work because, one, it's 14 minutes before your show, Katie, and I'm hungry. So we'll see you in a couple weeks, probably right around Halloween.
So stop your waiting and hesitating and tell us, please tell us.